reading poems, talking about poetry film, and showing some poetry films, some of Sarah's and some films that were made from poems of mine. And I just want to say a few things about Sarah because it's really a tremendous treat for her to be in this country and to be doing this. Sarah's one of the world's great contributors to the theory, making, curation, and practice of poetry film. My friend Jim Hall, with whom I've collaborated with on a couple of animated films, described Sarah's work to me as follows. He said she's the Gertrude Stein of poetry film. And she's a gifted poet, and her films have shown at festivals around the world, excuse me. Her book, The Poetics of Poetry Film, which was published by the University of Chicago Press 2 years ago, is really the defining work in the field. And most importantly, she's a great friend, a brilliant collaborator, and works with poets and filmmakers everywhere. So I'm happy and proud to call her my friend, and without further ado, introduce her.
Thank you very much.
Is there something that you would like me to forward to, or?
Should we go on to the book?
Sure.
I've got the book here as well for you to see. So, and there are copies on the desk, and it's going half price. So, if anybody's interested, £40 in the UK, it's $40 in the US now. I'm going to go straight on with it now for time. So this book took about 5 years to write. It's really been a labour of love since about 2005. I've been gathering material on, concrete poetry, graphic poetics. I did a research degree, and from that came this book. So I'm going to just say a bit about it. It came out a year ago, and it's been sort of selling well and endorsed in academic communities. Marc, sure. Thank you. So this is a few things that people have said. It is 400 pages odd, and it has over 40 contributors from a lot of Spanish films, Spanish-speaking, Argentinian. Marisol Belusky's written a chapter on Argentinian video poetry, which of course Video Bardo was one of the earliest video poetry festivals in the world. Thomas Sandeggio Como del Bel and Sebra has written a very good chapter on all across the world. So it's a very inclusive book from that sense. And we could go on to the next one, please. So some people will, one of the things that people will talk about is there were poetry films, video poems, and film poems. And just to sort of keep it really simple, film poems originally, as I put here, were more the avant-garde. It was the name cine poem, came from the French and surrealists. But people have said that the first poetry film was actually The Night Before Christmas, which was Charles Clement Moore, is it? Who there was a poem. Well, cinema producers used to use poems with intertitle, have a film make intertitles with the poem, and so the first one was in 1905. People have decided now, but it wasn't called a poetry film at the time. It was simply an exercise for a feature film company to try out a script, as it were. And I've just been in Vancouver, where Tom Conovis has been getting together his definition of the video poem. He's had an exhibition, which is one of the first of its kind to properly an academic exhibition, bringing together people in the field who make video poetry. And he defines that as slightly different. He says that a poetry film, often a poetry film, there's an actual page poem, and a film is made of that page poem, and it's quite illustrative in its content. Whereas for him, a video poem doesn't do that. It's the binding, the blending of the image and the text, the soundscape all together make the poem. And he's been, of course, a lot of people who make poetry films, they think that that's also defines a poetry film. So this is quite a contentious area. And of course, in Spanish-speaking countries, the term video poem is much more common. You use that more than poetry film. I've kind of argued in my book slightly around his definition, so that's something that is discussed. But we all make each of these all the time. So I think of artists, sometimes you're making a poetry film if you want to be really technical, sometimes you're making a video poem. Collaborate, it's very common to collaborate. So yeah, so the book's in 3 parts, and mainly I'm looking at form. So I come at this really like as an artist, looking at how form and structure play out through where you have, so for example, the screen for me is like a moving painting, and how would you analyse that with the, excuse me, with the narrative, which is in a sense flowing through it, and the graphic aspects of the screen as well. How do they work together? Excuse me. And then you have the voiceover, which is like, it's like a voice. Often it's a voice, a mnemonic voice, coming over your shoulder as if you're in someone's mind, and the film you're seeing is playing out of their mind. So for me, there's a lot of play to think about voice. What's the voice doing in terms of narrative? It's like a dialogic voice in the sense that, as well, because you're often a filmmaker is interpreting a poet. So often the film is in dialogue with the original poem, and it's different, but it's kind of working with it. So you have the actual voice of the person, their subjectivity, and then the filmmaker is interpreting that too. So there's a lot of theory that you can kind of get involved in terms of the poetry film. And of course it brings together the different historic strands of poetry, the visual poem, the verbal, the lyric poem, concrete poetry, experimental film. All of these flow into the poetry film, and create a very interesting space. So and the temporality of the poetry film. I don't have time to go into all of this today, but yes, but one of the most important things about poetry films today is that with the rise of looking at wider identities, gender differences, etc., that's happened really probably in the last 10, 20 years, I'd say. Almost, you might say, in parallel with digital media. I mean, I don't know what the relevance, whether that's particularly relevant or not, but the poetry film, you can make it, put it up online, and express yourself pretty quickly, and you can send it to festivals. There are lots of festivals now around the world. And so for people with, voices, silenced voices, or voices that need to be heard, they can be expressed this way. So it's very liberating for a lot of people to make poetry films. And as also about, of course, the climate. I mean, there's more eco-poetry films now than there ever was. And these are all getting out there, more festivals are showing these. So there's this sense of political side of the poetry film that's very important. And maybe doesn't quite so much come across, people collaborate, and so it gets a kind of momentum in the poetry film world. So this is just the still from the night before Christmas. It was Edison Studios. So it's generally now considered that this is the first example of a poetry film. Of course, they're magic lantern slides. You could argue that they move, maybe, or you can make an argument for something maybe earlier than that. There's room for a discussion, I guess. And then to come on to Herman Berlandt, well, of course, this is why we were kind of really interested to do this here, because of Herman Berlandt. He founded the national, it's all here. So the first Poetry Film Festival, he was the first person to say, not to talk about film poems so much, but to include a poem. He wanted to make the poem important in the film, and started the first dedicated Poetry Film Festival here in 1975. And he provided this blueprint, if you like, which you can see what he said here. And in fact, the numbers of people attending were pretty much as they often are today, because it's kind of a subgenre. So you might get 50 people, 60, 70, similar submission level, but that's rising, actually, that's rising quite a lot now. So yeah. So we owe it to him. So I'm going out to Berlandt tomorrow to see, there's a little pilgrimage, to see his house, to meet Stephen Ratcliffe, talk to him, and yeah, I'm making a kind of a little pilgrimage of that. Sorry I didn't ever meet him really. And so with the next slide, I'm going to be doing a reading, 2 readings after this. This is one of my more recent films, and it's about female abuse. In fact, it's a female suicide from abuse. In England, over 200 women a year commit suicide from domestic abuse. And I took the, well, you'll see in the intro to to the film, which we're going to see next, it's not common to have an explication as the film starts. I mean, you normally, like in most films, you just go straight into it. But I had to do that with this because I had to explain to people who didn't know the painting of Ophelia the background to Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had to make a sort of an explanation at the beginning of this. It's not a typical poetry film, but then again, you can do anything pretty much in a poetry film. You don't have to have music. You don't have to have. If it's a film poem, generally is without the words, but in a poetry film, you can really do what you like, and it can develop as you like. They're usually mostly between 3 and 5 minutes, so or they can be longer. This one's fairly long. It's 6 minutes, I think. But I think if we've got time, what I'd like to do is just to show this, and then do my 2 readings, which are about, I'm working on a very long family history project and combining family history with poetry film. And so I've got sort of different centuries or decades where there's a poem and a film. And I'm going to read from 2 of those, one's from the Victorian era and one is from medieval period, both of which places I visited and experienced and went to and found out about. But before that, as I say, this is a film which deals with domestic abuse. So maybe we could, should we turn the lights down? Or maybe that's not necessary, I don't know.
Yeah, let's see. So, here. And did you want to start from the beginning, or at that point that you had mentioned?
I think you should start from the beginning.
Okay.
It's easiest,
Yeah,
isn't
I think
it,
we have
really?
time to, so, yeah.
So now I'm going to.
Did you want me to pause it there? With that? Or just let it go?
Yeah, no, just, leave it pause there. Yeah.
Okay.
So as I was saying, I've done a lot of family history, and I grew up in a rather weird family. A lot of people do, but I had elderly parents, so they didn't really speak very much at all to each other, and they didn't really speak to me, and I didn't know anything about my family history. So, and I discovered mainly we come from either miners or farmers or people who work the rivers, really a lot right throughout history, and. Oh, it's gone on. And
Oh, did it?
you want to take it back to the beginning? Sorry.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So like right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So keep it paused there. Do you want me to start it, or you want me to just leave it
Just
there?
pause it there now.
Okay.
That's lovely.
Pause.
Thank you.
It's like Whistler.
Yeah, my granny. I discovered on my side that. They were bargemen on the River Thames in the Victorian period, and before that, for about 100 odd years, they were bargemen on the Thames. It's called lightermen, that's the term. And at the actual time that, I know the exact wharf where he had his barge, right by St Mary's Church, I know exactly where it was and everything. It was opposite where Whistler, James McNeill Whistler, used to go and live in Cheney Walk. Stayed in Cheney Walk on the other side, and used to get rowed around by Greaves, the Greaves brothers, who there was a boat builders, and would be about here on the River Thames just to paint this scene, and it occurred to me that there's a barge, this bargeman in the scene could have been my ancestor. Wow. So and that Whistler would have looked at that with one eye. And like the Oriental view of the beauty of the Orient, which I love. I mean, I do love the painting, so I love as well. It's just that he saw something that was a view rather than a reality, if you see what I mean. And I found out that my George, his son was an apprentice, because that's what they used to do, apprentice for 7 years. And in fact, he died when he was 17, and he could have died by falling into the water. So I wrote this poem about to George, really, and also to Whistler, as it were. So you could start.
Okay. Oops, sorry, just lost it.
This is going to be will be part of the poetry film, but I thought I'd read to it without the sound and just the visuals, if you like, as a sort of, in a sense, a sort of a sketch.
There we go.
So turn off the sound?
There's no sound with the next bit.
Oh, there's not, okay.
Whistler captures the two-dimensional view, your bargeman collar up, cap down to the tide, surging 30 feet, this brutal timekeeper, your day, your night, wrenching 20-foot oars, his visionary hue. Under old Battersea Bridge, no engine, 75 feet marooned, 7-year train body sensing the hobnail underside. Free surfing the ebb, the fall, stormed ships, fighters, lightermen gambling the drink, whilst his harmony consumed. Painting, he is blind to your hunch, your face riven, your dancing 17-year-old son, apprentice in the water's stare, memories of an uninherited, unsure foot, a slip, and I to heaven, into the Thames, a foul, duplicitous, open snare, your fist forever wading, not my son, not out to sea, grabbed before taken, under our St Mary's buried, like the rest of us, in an unmarked grave. I forgot to say that was an Italian sonnet, so it had a slight change. And I went a bit fast. But it's quite hard to time that. So it's still going now. We'll just let that run. The next one is, and then I'll finish. It's called Firewash, and it's about an ancestor who mined manganese, and the term for manganese is firewash. And this was in Cornwall in the 12th century, and manganese was used to make a very strong form of steel for a sword, or it could be used in churches for stained glass and something like that. So I thought it was all very interesting. I am driven down, though limp from the shadow side, to the shepherd's hut by the lake, dug from springs for the farmer's son. A storm is coming. It is you, soul tossing and turning, compassing the leadening tall, buffeting the family stone circle. My system eye slowly undoes to natural language, scanning ditch, stream, rock, ore, stardust to bone, stone to dust, shafts of rain descend. Below, the black hum of picks meet leaping manganese bison from Neanderthal caves. You rumble signs, windlass, prospector, see where the adit must cut, how deep the vein where a warm seam runs wet in a hoarfrost. Or fungus grows, and blackened leaves hang from trees. Rising colander springs send messages, lift all, polished, rolling far, rough, falling close by. Finding fist pocket, rub stone, finger to mouth we taste silamine, magic dark light merlinite, wash in the jewel fire of pyrolusite that is both uplifted in glassmaker's hands, stained amethyst or liquid rose for chapel, or brandished in clenched warrior fist, the hardest manganese steel. Which economics did you choose? Taming God or invincible sword? For Spartan, Viking or Cornish king? Miner, iron smelter, maker of legends or dreams? You bang doors, but I push open windows, fix on the opaque spiking lake, a scrying soul conjuring fire from water. All my stones, safe under the bed, like a healing madman tethered by the mystic veil, as you fall still against drying rain, uncanny under the drowsy pond, grim, shimmering. I want to say just that we went to stay there. There was a shepherd's hut. It was a farm, shepherd's hut. You can go and stay in it, and on the actual land. And there was a storm, and so the whole of that poem came from staying there, and as well as the knowledge I gathered about what they would have done. So it was a kind of it's experiential as well when you write these poems. You see, hopefully you can go to the place and actually experience it and be there and try and sense what it's what it's all about. Anyway, that's a little overview from me.